Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We have a quorum now. The HUD's meeting will come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderman Coatar. Alderman Ogilvy.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley.
Here.
Alderman Odenberg. Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
6 present.
Great. We are, the first order of business is to take up resolution number 104. We want to ask everyone here to be patient with us. We have a little bit of technical work to work out on this. This is something that we've been trying to reach a consensus on how we approach tax abatement. We've done quite a bit of work on this already, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time today, and then we'll immediately get in. Hopefully, if we adopt this, we'll get immediately into taking up the other legislation before us today. The intent was really to go ahead and sponsor this and have the Neighborhood Development Committee endorse it as well. However, they did not take it up on Monday. We have kind of pledged to a schedule, so I felt it was kind of important for us to keep to that schedule. We have been working on this for several years now. We adopted it very early this year with the intent that we would bring it up again as soon as we could get a map. We thought that we were going to have a map for both large and small projects that was going to be by land or project use. However, for technical details, we were not able to do that. And so we come up with a map for the under million where this resolution endorses the use of the model for larger projects. We have handed out this resolution before at our last meeting to discuss. We did not formally put it before us. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and put before us or ask someone to make a motion that we put before us the committee substitute for resolution number 104. So this isn't voting on the resolution. This is just putting the...
I move we place committee sub for resolution 104 before the committee.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a
Sure.
question on the motion? What I have before me, it says draft committee substitute. So are we putting this before us, or do we actually have a committee substitute?
Well, this is... why don't we scratch out the draft? This is the one that was emailed out, correct? So this was one that was emailed out with the intent of complying with the 24-hour advance notice. So
Okay.
we needed to go ahead and provide...
I'll make sure I have the right document. Thank you.
This is substantially different than the resolution that was introduced originally. However, it is fairly similar to the resolution that we had discussed informally at our last meeting. We made several adjustments to this. The first is that this is, we worded it in such a way that this applies to things coming before the HUD's committee. We did not want to be so presumptuous as to act for the Neighborhood Development Committee, so that is clearly stated not only in the preamble at the top, but in every reference. I think there's one other reference in somewhere in there that we referenced the HUD's committee as opposed to both committees. So that was one of the big changes. We kind of tweaked it or changed the organization a little bit of it. The first part is kind of a preamble where we kind of set the tone for it. That's about the first 3 or 4 whereas clauses. The second portion of it starts in about the middle of the first page, whereas since October 2017 SLDC, and that deals with the map for under $1 million. And then we take up the model at the top of the very next page, and then at the top of the third page, we reference the work that was previously in the resolution that we passed earlier this year, Resolution 33AA. And that, I believe, is pretty much verbatim with one exception, which I'll talk about here in a second. The map, I think, is everybody's pretty familiar with the map. We went through that quite a bit, so I'm jumping back now to the map portion on the bottom half of the first page. I'm trying to orientate everybody if they want to zone in on something. The second part, the model, which begins at the top of the second page, is, and I want to draw everybody's attention to this because I think it's very important for us to understand. The intent of the model is that, well, let's take if everybody could take a second and read that first paragraph, because that is loaded with information and it pretty well defines how we're going to use the model. And I want to be very, very clear about this so that people don't say that we're breaking the rules as we go along. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to read this sentence by sentence. And please, this is not meant to be a monologue. If somebody has something they feel strongly about. Whereas all the commercial projects and residential projects greater than $1 million in development cost, a financial analysis model has been created. So that's going to be for everything over $1 million, regardless if it's residential or commercial. It will not be subject to the abatement recommendations presented in Exhibit A map. So what we're saying there, or what we're trying to say, is that if a project comes in one of the strong neighborhoods, it is not going to necessarily, they will offer abatement to that project, whether it's residential or commercial. If it's a dense project that is going to dramatically increase the revenue on a per square foot basis, they may get 10-year tax abatement or TIF or longer. So that's what they're trying to say. That's why that is in bold there. We want to make sure everybody understands that. And this is the explanation. Instead, the model is designed to encourage residential and commercial density and the reuse of underutilized properties, which are more expensive to develop. Anytime you start building a building more than 1 or 2 stories, it gets more expensive, and therefore the tax abatement might be more appropriate. It also encourages the highest and best use of parcels for tax revenue generation and for the efficient uses of city resources. The model also sets incentive thresholds scaled to the strength of the neighborhood. Therefore, less dense or more disinvested neighborhoods, I don't know if that's a more disinvested neighborhoods, in other words, a neighborhood that has not seen as much investment, will have lower density thresholds for comparable projects. This will incent projects to either be denser or locate in areas of the city with lower thresholds. So in other words, if you're going to come into one of these green areas, the dark green, the idea is that you have to be, adding density substantially to the area. Otherwise, for the same project, you can go ahead and move outside of that area and you'll have a far lower threshold to meet. So I believe that is intended to be consistent with smart growth policies, which I think is in the city's interest to have smart growth, encourage density, and at the same time, it will go ahead and hopefully not discourage projects from locating in some of the weaker neighborhoods. Further, the model measures the extent to which a project A meets or exceeds the financial goals of the city and providing a reasonable return to the developer. So they explain what they mean by those in the 2 next areas. And then just at the last whereas clause on that page, the intent of this is commercial or mixed-use projects under $1 million will be evaluated by the model when feasible. Otherwise, SLDC will give consideration to the condition of the property, neighborhood market, commercial development. So what they're saying there is if it's a small project under $1 million, but it's commercial, They're going to try to use the model, but otherwise, that project may not be subject to the map either. The map is for small-scale residential projects, and that's it. Is there any questions on any of that, or does everybody have any problems with any of that? Alderman from the 18th, you look a little, do you have a question, Alderman?
It's not on what you were dealing with specifically. I was trying to understand some of the street lines here on
Sure.
the map.
Can we hold this up, and then we'll bring them up? I just, for my own sake, I want to make sure that, when we have projects come before the committee, I want to make sure that everybody in the committee understands what's appropriately before us and how it should be dealt with. The last thing that I want to, that's going to result in a fair amount of conversation today, I want to point out, and this is the, this is on the third page. We begin that and we say everything up above is kind of different and everything down below is the resolution the way it used to be. That's not correct. Item number 2 did not exist under the previous map, and we've left that deliberately blank because we want to deal with that today. It says the tax abatement cap. This was trying to respond to the concern that has been voiced before our committee that we are awarding tax abatement to high-end residential projects. And so we want to be explicit and create a cap on how much incentives and to what projects we're going to do. That was not done before. So first we're going to need to figure out how that cap works, and then we're going to have to go ahead and throw it up and before the now therefore clause up at the top of the page. So that's a change that we're going to need to make. So I wanted to go ahead, and that's kind of the guts of this resolution. At this point, Alderman Kennedy, I want to go ahead and give you the opportunity to ask the question you have, and then I'm going to either ask someone from SLDC to kind of walk us through the cap on the residential thing so that we can decide on that, incorporate the language in the resolution, and stick it in the right place. And then if there's anything else that somebody wants to talk about. So, Matt, do you have a question about a street on
This line on the map.
Okay.
Yeah, I see where you have Delmore coming down, but when you get into 18, it's not clear what that line is where they're not recommending any tax abatement.
Well, that's part of the problems, and we've addressed that in some of our discussions. But I mean, the boundaries are defined by the census block groups, by the Census Bureau, and that in particular is a problematic census block because, as you noted, it goes the boundary of the census block group goes north of Delmar by a couple blocks, but the vast majority of that census block group is in one of the strongest areas of the city, in the central west end. So I think in the last presentation we acknowledged that the map cannot be perfect, and we will definitely take that in consideration when there are projects in that area. And we noted that there may need to be exceptions to the map when they occur, and that we will explain those exceptions to the map when we make recommendations that deviate from the map. So that would be a prime example of one of those cases. If a project in that area came up and we needed to note an exception. So we would award an appropriate amount of abatement and explain why, even though the map says no abatement, the project is in an area that definitely deserves abatement.
Okay, so you're saying, what are you saying? That's not clear.
I'm saying that the boundaries defined by the U.S. Census
I understand that. Okay.
Census are deviate from what we would, from our preconceptions of what it should be. And
So why not just put the map to what you think it should be?
I think we have to build the map based on data and boundaries that meet that data. I mean, we could we could just, if we wanted to create a map by committee, that would be a method to do it, but we know that that's problematic for many reasons, and then we wouldn't have a quantitative basis to explain that to the public going forward. So I think the best thing to do is put together a map that handles 90% of the cases, and then explain exceptions when they come up, and this would be
How would you explain exceptions? Well, you would have something in writing that says there's exceptions? Because the way it would be right now, then, that area that would be in the poorest section of that census block would appear to be as if we would be supporting no tax abatement in it, and that doesn't make any sense. And unless something is written that says there will be exceptions for that, future boards or future bodies would not know what to follow, which is what I've seen down here significantly.
No, I think you're correct. That's something that I've talked about internally. We haven't figured out a way to document what the exceptions would be, but at least when it comes to this type of problem. The reverse problem exists in some parts of the city too, where you've got one that I think is most likely is the Compton Heights area. That's lumped in one census block group with a large, it's majority the Gate District. And I think the Gate District probably needs a little bit more abatement than what the map says, and I think Compton Heights probably needs a little bit less abatement than what the map says, but we're restricted by what the block group boundaries are. And honestly, those block group boundaries are going to change after the 2020 census too.
Right.
So
That's why I don't know why we're doing this now.
what's that?
That's why I don't know why we're doing this now, because we don't have to change it again. What we need to do is just have a simple process that says, we'll look at it case by case,
Right.
a resolution that says that. But you can't take the Central West End and say, this is the Central West End, and that's how it is, because we have too much that needs to be done. And part of it, north of Delmar, that has been neglected. And it is the Central West End. So, I mean, it's really confusing. And I'm glad you brought up the Gate District, because I was going to say something about that and about 4 other areas on this map that make no sense.
So what it is, in this particular section, that census block includes an area that is pretty well developed, but the northern part of that area, which is north of Delmar, has not seen it.
Right.
So then what the resolution is saying, based upon this map, is that the area that is in worst shape and really should qualify for tax abatement would not get any, because it's in the same census block as a portion of the ward that has had seen development. That's not going to work.
Yeah,
You have to have some kind of something that either says there's an exception, or you need to show the line differently.
Yeah, I think the intent was that this would be a baseline, and that for any project that we felt, deviated from, to write exceptions for every possible type of exception would be, it would be a fool's errand. We just couldn't anticipate every possible exception. So, for example, a project in that area, we would, number one, we'd note that you have a concern that it should get it, and I think we would all agree too that it should get abatement. And what we would do is then say, the map has a recommended abatement level of no abatement. We believe it should have 10 years at 90% because of this, and this. So, documented disinvestment, no mortgage activity in the immediate blocks, vacant properties. So it would not prevent us and you from recommending a significant amount of abatement in an area of need. We would just document why it would. So if there was questions at some point from another party, we would have a documented reason why the abatement is being awarded. I think it's an inherent problem when you draw any type of map, is that, if we try to fix that problem, then other problems, you can't fix every problem with the map.
This particular problem is one that can't be fixed with data, because there is no data available at a small enough geography to be able to Like the census block group is the smallest geography level that we have, and we don't get to determine what the boundary lines are for the census block groups. They just are what they are.
Now, I believe that you could come up with some kind of language to address a variance or some kind of special.
Well, I think
I'm sorry?
we've made it clear that the map is sort of the first cut. When we get an application in, we're going to look at the map. But we're not going to look at the map in any isolation. We're going to look at it along with a lot of other issues, and there are probably going to be many exceptions. Now, in this particular case, Alderman Kennedy, we've recently approved a Chapter 99 plan for the area north of Del Mar authorizing a 10-year tax abatement. To me, that would trump this map anyway. So in your case, I think that's all taken care of by an ordinance that's already been approved.
There's another aspect of this. What that does is it vests all of the knowledge and history of this in this administrative branch, as opposed to having anything in writing that this legislative branch can see why we got to this point and what would be the guidelines related to it, if you understand what I'm saying. If you don't have it in writing someplace where this body can look at how will future configurations of this Board of Aldermen understand that there can be these variances. It would not. It would all be vested in your office. And no way for a new alderperson to know that they can have a variance in this area. And that's problematic.
No, I agree with you. I think that we should probably figure out some way to put language into the resolution. I was going to mention when it came to the tax abatement cap, like 3 areas. Now, this is a different type of exception, but I think it's important that we put as many of the exceptions as possible in writing, because otherwise I think we're going to lose trust with the public, because they're just going to say, well, you're just going to legislate by exception. For example, now this is one that I think is harder to figure out how to put into writing, but ones I think you could put into writing would be things like if the property is LEED certified, because we want to do sustainable buildings, if it's certified historic, or if it's affordable housing. Those would be 3 potential exceptions. One thing that came up, and I don't know if you want to do, well, it's still, you can't really do it by data because it's the block group, but I don't know, you'd have to come up with some sort of way of saying this particular block is not like the block group that it's in majority, in the majority sense. So how do you do that? How do you make it objective? I don't know, you'd have to put some sort of language in there like there's at least X number of vacant properties on the block, or home sales on that block are at least X% below the block group, or something like that. You could put those types of things in the resolution, but I think that's the direction we have to go.
If you look at the last whereas on page 1, it says, in addition to the map, available project financial data, comparable sales, specific market data, and urban design qualities may be utilized in making the final recommendation for residential projects under $1 million. So it's showing that other things are going to be considered beyond the map. Now, you may want to play around with that language, expand that language, but that would be the place that makes it clear that we're not just saying whatever the map says is what LCRA is going to recommend, because there are a number of other factors that are going to be considered, and it's going to be on a project-by-project basis.
I would make it even more clear than that, but that was my point, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Alderman, if we put in something in there which was not perhaps specific to your block, but specific to that situation, which would be, as an example, blocks that are not representative of the census tract, would be a reason to deviate from something to that effect.
I think we can work some language. I just wanted to point out it's a concerning issue.
I think it's a valid concern. We'd like to get as many, we'd like to try to nail, I think you're starting to understand the challenges that we're having with trying to do this. But we're trying to get as specific as we can, because every time we make an exception, we're subject to criticism. So let's kind of noodle on that for a little bit.
Okay. Thank
Maybe
you.
we can have somebody kind of tweak that language while we're discussing. And then, is there anything else on the resolution, other aspects of the resolution before we get into the issue of the affordable, the cap on the amount that we spent, subsidized for high-income housing? Alderman?
Mr. Chairman, just from a procedural standpoint, I want to kind of go back to the motion, because there was a motion to put it before us. I'm wondering if we're getting ahead of ourselves by making recommendation. We didn't vote on we didn't call the roll on putting it before
Did we
us.
not call
No, sir, we didn't.
Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry, I thought, I guess we did the intent. So we have,
We made the motion by the 24th, and Alderwoman from the 19th
okay.
second.
Thank you for, not real strong on procedure, I just assumed we did. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. We are way ahead of ourselves then. My apologies.
Alderman Kennedy,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Coatar. Alderman Ogilvy, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Bosley,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg, Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
6 aye votes.
Okay, now it's properly before us, now that we're, thank you, Alderman. Do you have any other comments or?
Well, I just want to make a small comment after what the Alderman from the 18th said. I'm just wondering, going to the last whereas and going back to the first sentence that Dale read, if there could be maybe a such as clause in there that would say such as whatever examples, and we don't maybe have to go overboard and creating 100 different examples, but something that's broad enough that the intent is there, that we clearly understand that there are necessary exceptions at some point. As we walk through finding the right language, maybe that's the point to insert it. It's just my thought. Other than that, I don't have any other comments to add to the resolution.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Okay, if it's all right, then Dale or Matt or Jonathan, whoever, could one of you kind of lead us through what you would like to see, or what you're recommending as our alternatives for capping the incentive for residential housing?
Well, at the last meeting, we didn't find, part of the presentation was to include a cap on the total abated value for residential housing per unit. I don't think out of that meeting we got a clear consensus. We'd come up with basically 2 times the regional housing value would be about $255,000. That's perhaps a starting point. It's really, that would be, if we had a recommendation, that would be where it is, because we could track it to the regional housing value. But we're open to your suggestions of anything from no cap to a significantly higher cap. So just to explain, we would, if there was an abated value, we would not go, if there was a let's say $100,000 home purchase price and a $200,000 or $300,000 added value as part of their project, we would, at that $265,000 cap, we would not abate any value above the $265,000 improved value.
So that would be, and by comparison, to put all this in perspective, the high-rise on Kings Highway, which received a great deal of criticism, the average per unit, that ended up being about $275,000.
275, correct.
So,
But I think a good example too is a lot of homes in, let's say, the Grove or Shaw, Shaw and the Hill that we're seeing tear downs and rebuilds can be anywhere up to, $400,000 or $500,000 at this point. So the cap would then, we would set a cap at a certain value, say 265, that anything above that value would then not be abated. So we would adjust the abatement to not include values above a certain limit. So a couple questions are the total amount, and do you want to cap that on the total value or just the improved value?
I have no strong feelings. Why don't we go through the committee and people can kind of comment. Alderman Kennedy will serve. Oh, did you have any strong feelings about creating a cap for how much a project could cost or be valued before we'd stop or not abate it? Yeah, you have no strong feeling. Alderman Boyd, do you have a strong feeling or comment?
I don't have any strong feeling, but I just wanted you to walk me through it just a little bit without it being too complicated. I'm trying to make it simple. Each project is evaluated based on its merit, and you kind of know how much tax abatement to give. So you're either going to give 5 years, 10 years, whatever that particular matrix, but then you're going to drill down even further and say, I'll give you 10 years at 75%, but then I'm also going to cap it. So are we doing the same thing twice, or what are we trying to achieve? I just want to make sure I'm clear, because I would think you could kind of capture that on the front end of how many years and the percentage of tax abatement you would
In a way, it would actually do that. So let's say the map said 10 years at 90%. But the house was like a $500,000 house, then we would basically adjust the 10 years at 90% to say 10 years at 60%. Mm-hmm. So that would in effect negate the value above the cap. So we would adjust the abatement down to reflect the cap.
So in saying that, in my mind, it just seems like a cap is superfluous. That it's like, why add more on top of what we're already trying to achieve?
And I think that was I think that came out in the last meeting too. So go ahead, John.
I think the only reason is because it's really to send a message that we're trying to not subsidize really wealthy housing. That's really the reason.
Wealthy housing is over 500,000.
And that's why we're coming to ask you what you think an appropriate cap is, or if a cap is inappropriate at all. If that is the recommendation of the committee to go without a cap, I think we're comfortable with that.
I just question a cap. It just seems that, and I'm not absolute strong on it, but it just seems like I'm putting in your hands that you're going to go through the analysis, going through the financial model, and you're going to say it's 5 years at 50%. That's all you're going to get, and that caps it, in my mind. So it's like a duplication of efforts if we want to add an extra layer, which tends to be so bureaucratic.
Yeah, this was an idea that came up through our various meetings, and we thought it was an idea that had merit that we would obviously explore. So
Other cities do it too.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, and John's research has shown that it is something that is used in other cities. So as we said, the amount of the cap, whether there's a cap or not, is really up to the committee. But as John said, it's more of a message that we're not going to incent high-value homes.
And then when you put this cap on, then you're going to force the assessor's office to do more, because they're going to have to monitor and watch and see, how much.
We'll make it easy on them by just structuring it from the outset. So it'll be based on, and granted, this is a little bit of a weakness to it, but it'll have to be based either on at the point of sale, so we'll enact the abatement at the point of sale, or more likely we're going to have to talk to the developer and see what they think the sale price is going to be at a time.
How will it impact their software, the assessor's software? Because if you say I'm going to cap this $500,000 house at $60,000, I'm just making this number up, how would they know they've achieved that 60,000 savings with the fluctuation of real estate assessments?
We would base it just on the outset, what we think the value of the house is going to be from the time that it's finished with construction. So, for example, if the cap was, let's just make the math simple. If you're starting at a zero baseline and they're building a $500,000 house and you use a $300,000 cap, assuming you're in an area that would allow 100% abatement to begin with, your cap would be the 300 divided by 500, which is 60%. Or is that 60? Yeah. 60%, yeah. So it'd be 60%. So then in the legislation, we would just, for that particular abatement, we would say this is a 10-year at 60% abatement. And then all the assessor's office would have to do is say, oh, it's 60% abatement, no matter what the value ends up being down the road.
My point was, but if you put a dollar value, how does that, how would they capture the actual dollar amount? It's easy to say, okay, it's 5 years, and then it comes off the rolls, so it'll just drop off, right? But if you say it's maxed out at 60,000, then how does that impact their software, where they would actually say, okay, we're now in year 4, and you've achieved 60,000, so we don't need the extra year?
I think what we're saying is not that it would be, so are you asking like cumulatively, like you've saved this much in this year and this much in year 2 and this? See, I don't think we're capping it in that sense. I think what we're just doing, like what other cities do, is they just say, we're not going to cap at an amount of house value above a certain amount. Some cities actually say if the house of the value of the house is above 300,000, then there's just no abatement available at all. We were trying to be a little bit more generous and say we're just not going to abate the amount above that number.
Oh, this is is this a or is this a?
Yeah, it's like a circuit
breaker. 5
breaker.
years, 50%, or you do 30,000. It's not both.
Yeah, it's a circuit breaker,
Okay.
basically.
Okay, I got it now. See, I thought you were doing both. That's why I was thinking it was duplicitous,
Yeah.
because it's like.
Yeah, no, it would be a circuit breaker to basically replace what the map recommendation is.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm with you now.
And I think, as they said, if it was in an area where normally you'd get 70% tax abatement, we'd recalculate it if the project is above whatever the cap is, and it would wind up getting 57% tax abatement or something like that, to make it easy for the assessor to figure out, because otherwise he's not ever going to know exactly when the cap is happening or anything. So we just do that up front, and it would simply reduce the percent of tax abatement that the project would have, if indeed it's a project above the cap.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Just for us to think about, maybe what we do is we cap the limit for the people, because the map is already kind of indirectly capping indirectly capping things. I mean, if somebody came in and spent $500,000 on a home, that in an area that was qualifying for 10 years at 95%, would that be a problem? So maybe what we do is just think about it. Just think about that. We're going to try to go through everybody and get this wrapped up. Alderwoman Davis, do you have any strong feelings?
I just have a couple of things. I don't particularly care for this at all, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. And I know you want to have an incentive model to appease people, but I look at building communities. I look at the socioeconomics part of having communities that are mixed and healthy, and income levels, all of that. And so when you go to cap me and put me in a certain bracket, that this is all I can have in a community, then it limits that community for its growth opportunities. And I give you for instance, around Terry Park, we have houses that run from 190 to almost 300,000. But that census tract and this map would cap me, and all I could have is probably people who could afford is 170 to 200,000. That's not fair to everyone in that community. It's not fair for the growth opportunities that could be there. It's not fair to the people who already live there and not allowing their opportunities for their homes to have more value by building more expensive houses there. It's just not fair on a whole lot of levels. And so what I want to say to you is, if we're going to use something like this, And this is going to stagnate development as well. It is, because when I look at Gate District, I got all those vacant lots over there. I don't want just one income bracket to move in there. That's not how you build communities and cities. That's not what you do. You look at every aspect of it.
No, I agree with you. So I kind of think that the cap that we're talking about might be more of the issue what you're talking about with this, in terms of like limiting the value of houses. If we were to if you were to take the cap out of the conversation, let's just talk about the map itself. There would be, just based on the map only, there would be no limit to the value of the house that could be abated. It would only be limited by what the strength of the neighborhood is. And I think the idea there is not to try and create like this is the pocket of low income and this is the pocket of high income. That's not what the map is trying to do. What the map is trying to do instead is it's trying to say this is the area where the market is healthy and people are buying houses without needing abatements. So therefore the city can save tax revenue by not giving abatements here because projects are still going to happen. Whereas in the areas that are purple or red or even orange, these are areas where if we don't give help, projects aren't going to happen. So we need to provide help.
And it's not enough help. If we really wanted
even
help.
still, it's probably not enough help. No.
No.
No, even still, it's not enough help, as we talked about the last time. But it's, it's a start. And the other thing is that we think that by sort of putting this in a map form, making it visual like this, the hope is that people who are doing investment will start to see, they'll say, hey, this area is really strong, so they might be, those who are looking more for safe investments might say, I'm just going to go into the green area. Those who are saying, hey, I can get all this abatement or whatever, I can if I go into the orange area or whatever, it might help entice them to say, well, I'm going to try and invest in an orange area instead of a green area now because I know abatement's available in the orange and not in the green. But again, I think that the average homeowners, people are already moving into these green areas without necessarily needing abatement. That's what we're seeing. So
They're getting abatement.
not all the time. Not all the time, and a lot of times what we've seen from doing side-by-side comparisons is that properties that are getting abatement in some of these green areas are right next door to properties that aren't getting abatement, and they're selling for the same price and they're selling in the same time span, which means that the abatement is not really moving the needle at all. We're just basically giving up tax revenue.
So what is your remedy for my area that you have green here that needs?
Which area that you have green?
So we brought it up earlier, so I'm talking about Gate District West. And it's right here on the tip of, where would?
Like 1231.002 there? Is that the gate you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Alderman Kennedy is working with our council on trying to draft language to identify that
Okay.
as an example of an exception.
That's what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Coatar, any questions? No questions. Alderman Ogilvy.
No, I'm not rushing this, because we'll get screwed on that.
I think we should have a cap. I think the cap should be 400,000. And I think I agree. In the last couple of years, I've seen builders build houses with no tax abatement. It seems to have no effect on whether they're selling or not at this point. So, which is encouraging, and I also just detect this outpouring of concern from the public that we need to have some type of upper limit on what we're abating. So I'd put the cap in, and I don't think, my opinion is that if we have an upper threshold that limits the amount of tax abatement beyond a certain point, it will have, and that if that point is, $400,000, it will have no impact at all on whether people build those houses or not. It'll just create a more fair ecosystem, I think, for all of us, and create more tax revenue for all the taxing entities, taxing districts. So I hope we work out these details and get going on this. Thanks.
Alderman Bosley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number one, I appreciate, once again, all the hard work on everything. And I appreciate you all adding an extra, I guess, color here to graph as far as the areas that might need a little more than, it looks like we capped last time at 10 years at 95, then another 5 at 50%. I personally don't know if you all have driven through some of these places that you are putting or wanting to kind of put caps on, or let me just say in general, the places that you kind of outlined in red and kind of stopped at 10 or 15 years. I think if you really drive through those areas, you see how, in terrible condition the entire side of town is. Not to say that you don't, but I think capping anything on that side of town prohibits us, well, not prohibits us, but it hurts the north side of St. Louis in general. It's already said that it's hard for people to work with the city, and different developers have a hard time trying to get things done. And I think, in this time where there is a lot of opportunity for the north side of St. Louis, because everything has been built up in the Central West End and other places, not everything, but a vast majority of it, we have a lot of land mass. We have a lot of potential for growth over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Nobody has a concrete plan on exactly where the city will be in 10 years. So we don't know how the NGA is going to impact the entire city of St. Louis, nor the north side in general. So I think right now, moving hastily and putting things in place where we haven't even drawn the lines yet, or haven't even looked into what it's going to look like as a city if we reduce the Board of Aldermen. We're doing a lot of things, and we haven't put plans in place for what's going to take place over the next 10 or 15 years. I myself plan on staying on the north side and, until I die. I'm going to move around, of course, and, and travel, but I would like to see the area come up, and I would like to see the people that live in the area now, seeing as we have 40% homeowners, still have the opportunity to stay in that area at the same time. So I think what we're doing right now is limiting that possibility, right? If we start capping things on that side of town, or just in general, let's say, for instance, you don't want to give out 20 years tax abatement. Let's say 20 years from now, when the NGA is built up, you got Paul McKee's plan, maybe they come to fruition, maybe that entire side of town starts to look like the Central West End. It starts to look like how it looks on Delmar, and property values do go up, right? What is going to be set in place for those individuals on the back end for the last 5 to 7 years while the neighborhood was being built up? Them themselves were putting money into their houses at the same time. Then they maybe not they may not have the capacity to be able to afford to pay for those taxes after the 10 years after they finish building that house up. So you got a lot of different programs that might be coming to the neighborhood as far as loans and different different incentives that we can have aside from the actual city for people to want to come develop in the area. So what I don't want to do is kill the people that live there and cut them off from having the ability to be able to stay in that area at the same time. I think we need the maximum amount, and there is no maximum right now from my understanding. I think 15 years is not enough. That's barely enough time for the development plans throughout, once again, for everything that we got going on in the city. That's still not one direction that we're headed in. There's still not one full plan, I think, that we've collectively talked about as far as with the board being reduced, as far as with this whole project coming up on how we want to build up this side of town. Everything is just kind of all over the place. So I think we need to look at moving that up to 20, 25, wherever it needs to be, but we have no investment on that side of town aside from the NGA. That's something that we need to be looking at in keeping everything fair. Why is it that right now, at this particular point in time, after everything, after all these years, you got houses right now that still are coming out of a 20-year tax abatement? Why are we trying to cap them at 15? Why are you capping the north side at 15? Why wouldn't we put them at the same amount that we've capped out any properties in the Central West End? What is the highest amount of tax abatement that we've given out in the city? I think the highest amount that's ever been given should be allotted to be given on the north side at the same time. If it's been 20 years, 25 years, somebody in that red or purple section should have the opportunity to get 20 years also, whatever it is. And I know we've done 20 years we just did 20 years on one building. So we can do 20 years for residents. Businesses are something that we want, of course, but we need people that live in the actual city to be able that's what pretty much is the heartbeat of our city. So we want to incentivize people to come in. We want to incentivize businesses, but we also have to focus on the residents, and I think that's one thing that we're not particularly focusing on, especially when you're talking about underdevelopment. My people have nothing. We don't have any resources. We don't have, and when they start to pour in, we want to soak up everything. And I think, once again, that cap needs to be moved to whatever it is the most has ever been done in the city before. And even looked at further than that, because we do have a $2 billion investment, which is one of the largest federal investment that we've had in the city. And it's, once again, smack down in the middle of a part that's falling apart in the middle of town where there's absolutely nothing. So we need to give those people everything that the city has to offer, to incentivize them to stay and make sure that they can afford to live in that area 15 or 10 or 20 years from now. And the people that want to come in and build, I have people that want to come and put $250,000 houses right next door to mine. I want them to build $300,000 houses, $400,000 houses. But just because they have the money to do so, they're in an area that has no investment at all. So I don't want them to feel like on this side of town, they have a less chance of getting what they need to get done than they feel like than things have been on the other side of town. So I just would like to express that I think we need to move those years up, I think.
Well, let me comment on a couple of things. First of all, I cannot recall us giving more than a 10-year tax abatement to an individual house. These are all projects under $1 million, so it'd be like an individual house or two houses. In years and years and years, the only time we have been giving more than 10 years to a house is affordable housing, and that's a 15-year. So it seems to me that if anyone's coming into your area and doing any kind of a major project over $1 million, this map has nothing to do with that. We may well offer a 20 or 25-year tax abatement.
I'm not talking about the over million. I'm talking about the residents. I know we don't have $1 million. So those are the people I'm concerned about, not the people coming in that's finna spend over $1 million. I'm worried about the people who will be in the area when those millions get spent. So
an individual homeowner.
That's right, 20 years. That's what we would like to see.
I mean, we can do it. It's up to the committee. Obviously, we can do it. Legally, it's possible, so we could certainly do that.
I think that's what we need to look at.
It just seems like most homeowners don't have a horizon that long off in the future anyway, and it wouldn't mean much to them. But if this committee wants to do that, we have no problem with that.
I think that would be necessary for the growth of my community in particular.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. Are you more concerned about the people who are moving in and making the investment, or are you more concerned about the people who are already there and their taxes going up?
The people who are already there. And of course, I'm looking forward to people coming in and helping build, but the people who are there right now, right this second, is where the concern is for now. Because when we do get things coming in, and I finally do, we get some money coming in, I want to be able to tax abate them. I want to be able to give them, what they need to have some type of cushion over the next 10 or 15 years while things come up.
So that's actually a separate problem from tax abatement. And this is something that we have talked with the assessor's office at length about. Tax abatement legally can only be applied whenever there is an investment. So, and I mean an investment in the particular property. So if somebody's property taxes are going up because of investment going on next door, tax abatement won't be able to be used to stop their taxes from going up. You would have to use another mechanism, which currently does not exist at the state level. It would have to be some sort of circuit breaker. So I think there might be like a senior circuit breaker at the state level that is in legislation, but as far as a like a low-income circuit breaker, that's something that I know Sean Ordway has worked with the state on, trying to get approved a few years ago, back when he worked for the state. And I don't remember all the details, but I know that he said that it didn't end up coming to fruition. But it's sort of a separate issue from the tax abatement map.
Right,
But
right.
it is still a very serious issue.
I get that. So most of the people in my area don't need work on their houses. I mean, not don't need work on their houses, but they do need work, which is why I said, once we get some money, most of us just don't have the funding to put into it.
Yeah.
So once we start putting money into these houses, the valuation will go up, and that's where the tax abatement can be used, which is what I'm referring to.
Okay, yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, again, I think we were looking at we were thinking about, as Dale said, this was single-family houses, so that's why we were kind of looking at 15 years as sort of the typical cap. But I mean, if the rest of the, committee would like us to add another layer going up to 20 or 25 years, I mean, it can be done. So,
Well, or we could simply change what's showing now in purple
right.
and make it up to 25 years if that's what the committee desires. I mean, there's nothing that would prevent that from happening.
Well, I would say my whole area needs to be in purple, because half of it's in red. And I would most certainly say there are a few other people who would say the same thing if they were in the room.
Definitely 25th
Like,
one.
the 25th, I'm sure the 21st would share the same sentiments. There are,
Well, the Board of Aldermen has the capacity to modify this map in any way they see fit, so that's up to you all.
also with the exceptions, I also think that we need to have, I really, really feel like there needs to be some guidelines on, what, like we already talked about. I don't want to keep beating the horse with that, but what those exceptions are, if any exceptions, because things do get, you know how the city is. Everything gets clouded over time. 4 or 5 years from now, we'll be talking about issues that we talked about today, and somebody will be trying to argue, saying, no, this was meant, or that was meant, oh, no, they said it like this. So having everything written down and what those exceptions are to these rules would be very helpful, for myself moving forward, and I'm sure the entire committee. And I just think we really need to look at what the plan will be for the north side. You all are the development corporation. This is what you do. I think we need to be looking 15 years ahead at the same time while we writing maps like these, so we can be prepared for what's to come and not only looking at what's going on right now.
Remember that this map has the potential of being changed significantly when the new census comes. So it's not a stagnant item. It's assumed that it would be changed every year. I mean, in fact, the language allows us to change it as new numbers come in. So, and then when the census occurs in a couple of years, there's probably even more changes that would happen. So it's not a stagnant thing. It's a moving document.
Living document. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I believe are they still working on the wording on the one? Okay, let's try to get this thing to the point. Alderman from the 3rd, I want to make sure I understand. I want to make sure I understand. Where were you at on the value of the homes? Did you express?
Yes.
Alderman from the 3rd, did you have an opinion about the cap, the dollar value cap of new?
Yes, sir. I think, once again, I think that needs to be a little bit higher. I don't know you cannot predict what's going to happen in an area of disinvestment when you finally get investment.
No, I'm
Right,
just,
so
the
I'm-
dollar value.
Right, so I think it needs to be about $500,000 or 400 to $500,000 would be good. I don't know what's coming my way.
Okay, all right.
Do you guys want to,
Let's deal with that,
Situation.
because I think there's some consensus there. What I'd like to suggest is that we go ahead and create the cap at 90% of the conforming loan, the Fannie Mae conforming loan amount. That is a nationally published figure. I just checked on my phone, it's $450,000. So 90% of that would be about $400,000. So that would be a nationally established number that will probably change over time, and if we use 90% of that number, that at least today gets us at about 400,000. So for that, what we'd like to do is move that to, on the resolution, we have to pull it out and not make it 2. We have to stick it up before the now therefore clause and say for both the map and the model, we shall cap all tax abatement on residential property at 90% of the Fannie Mae conforming loan limit
On a per unit basis.
on a per unit basis.
That's fine.
So that issue's off the table. Then the next issue is the wording of the exception that Alderman Kennedy brought up. I know they're working on that. Is that something that we think we can have, if we have testimony for the other
I don't think
legislation?
he feels like he can get it done today.
He does not feel like he can get it done today. Okay, so we will go ahead and not take this, we'll work on that one. I'd like us to take some time and think about Alderman Bosley's comments that he made. We can all talk amongst ourselves between now and the next meeting. And then we'll provide Alderman Kennedy an opportunity to do that, to work with our council on figuring that out.
Okay, thank you.
So then what we can do is I believe most of the concern seems to be about the map and not the model. Everything we're dealing with today is model related, I believe. It's commercial, our larger projects over $1 million. So if there's not any objections on the model, let's go ahead and take up the legislation today. So we'll go ahead and let that set. We'll try to bring it up and get the map portion of this worked out before our next meeting. And at this juncture, let's see, our colleague from the 11th Ward has been patiently waiting for us. Why don't we go ahead and put him on first? Alderman Ballmer?
From the 10th.
I'm sorry, I said the 11th. I'm sorry, I meant the 10th. Forgive me.
So they're still working on the language, yeah.
Yes, they're still working on the language.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
I guess we're going to start off with 9. If we're going, are we doing numerically, Alderman? I'll let it be your
It's
preference.
your committee, but number 9's fine. Actually, we went over number 9 last HUD's meeting.
Oh,
but
we already did number 9.
Just did not vote on it.
Okay.
So we've gone through the whole,
Okay, so we did that. There's, I think we were in
but
consensus.
but I still need, you need to hold
Okay,
a
we'll
vote to
come
pass
back,
it out.
we'll go through resolution number 7.
Resolution 79 is 5211 through 15 Northrop. Northrop is on the, what we call the disenfranchised portion of the Hill neighborhood when I-44 cut through. This is mostly industrial. What we're doing here is an enterprise zone. We have a company called Missouri Terrazzo, one of the largest floor manufacturers in the state, if not the country, is moving in. They're bringing with them a relocation of 42 jobs, 37 union, and 10 new jobs in the next 5 years. It will be owner-occupied property. Purchase price a little under $1 million, and they're putting another $350,000 into it, bringing all these jobs to the Hill. This is in the industrial section. I forgot I had to hand these wonderful things out, if you wouldn't mind.
Alderman Ogilvy. Could you leave one for Jeffrey if he comes back? Everybody's got it before them. Go ahead, Alderman.
So fine. Yeah, again, Northrop is, if you're familiar with where Gateway, the old O'Fallon Tech is, that's Northrop. It runs along the south border of that. This is about a block and a half, 2 blocks up from there. So it is surrounded by Volpe, Salami, other industrial parts of it. There is a small bit of residential in that area, but this is the enterprise zone area of the neighborhood. Taking this building and putting all these new jobs, keeping jobs or moving jobs into the city.
Okay, are there any questions? Alderman Kennedy.
No questions.
Alderman Boyd.
No questions.
Alderwoman Davis.
No questions.
Alderman Coatar.
No question.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Where is this company currently located?
Where they go,
Where are they today?
where they at today?
Yeah.
Paul, where are you currently located at? North Euclid. North Euclid. So we're stealing them from,
So they're in the city already?
yes. Mhm. Keeping them in the city is what we're doing. He did not own the property where he was at, so he's actually going to own this property as opposed to being in a long-term lease.
Any other questions, Alderman? Alderman Bosley. Okay, hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion on resolution number 79.
I move that we adopt Resolution 79 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Coatar, Alderman Ogilvy, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Odenberg, Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
7 aye votes.
Okay, resolution number 79 passes out. While you're here, Alderman, let's take up resolution number 9.
Certainly.
Could you refresh our memories on this?
Okay, we are on the same street, Northrop Avenue, in the Hill neighborhood. This is the site of the old Hotley Cheese Company that has moved out of the city. Down the street from them, around the corner, is a company called Chocolate, who moved to the Hill a few years ago. They are now purchasing this property to put in their packaging and shipping, which is currently in the building, which will allow them to enlarge their production facility around the corner. So what this will do is actually create 15 new jobs, again, another owner-occupied business staying in the city. And the recommendation was 10 years at 80% for the tax abatement. This is, again, is an enterprise zone. I'm open to any questions. Juan, here's your handouts. I apologize.
Alderman Kennedy, any questions?
I'm not a good fan of white.
No questions.
Alderman Boyd, any questions?
No questions.
Alderwoman Davis, any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Coatar, any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy?
Nope.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll for resolution number 9.
Do we need a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I move that we adopt Resolution 9 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous.
Hearing no objection, we'll consider resolution number 9 passed out of committee. Now you know why I don't ever want to run.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the board.
We have several people who are not on staff in the city with us today. One's in my ward, and Well, why don't we go ahead and pick them up so they can leave then? That would be resolution, where is it? Oh, here it is, here, I think. 103. I guess I don't.
Where's Ingrassia?
I can, just go ahead and walk us through the project quick, if you would.
Sure will. Good morning, everybody. We appreciate your time. My name is Doug Rasmussen. I'm with Duff & Phelps. We're a local consulting company here. My client is Peter Hulse here to my right. Peter is redeveloping, has purchased 4156 Manchester Avenue, which is the old former headquarters of Beyond Housing on Manchester, and he's purchased that at the end of last year, and is planning a redevelopment of that project, which all-in costs, including acquisition, soft and hard costs, is about $1.1 million, and then another $400,000 in tenant furniture, fixtures, and equipment. The redeveloped building will be the location, the second location, first city location for Beast Butcher and Block Barbecue Restaurant. They're currently in Belleville, Illinois. They plan to hire 40 new people, create a new payroll over $1 million a year, and about $5 million in gross receipts out of that restaurant. And Pete, I don't know if you want to mention anything about your acquisition of the building or your plans, but we appreciate and look forward to your questions.
What's the tax abatement structure on this then?
So the tax abatement structure on this is, it's a step-down tax abatement. We worked with John Ferry at SLDC to do more of that tax assurance model. Pete bought the building last year, and so prior to his acquisition, the building was exempt. It will generate $9,517 in taxes at the end of this year. And so we wouldn't be impacting any of those new taxes that are being created under the private ownership. After it gets redeveloped, it's going to have a 2-year step down. So once the building is complete, the first tax year after that, when the tax abatement takes effect, it's going to be 100% tax abatement for 2 years. Then it'll go year 3 and 4, it'll go 80%. Years 5 and 6, it'll go 60%. Years 7 and 8, 40%. And then years 9 and 10 down to 20%. Again, that's over and above that baseline of 9517 in taxes that are will be paid in full this year.
Okay, are there any questions of the developer or sponsor? Alderman Kennedy?
No questions.
Alderman Boyd?
Sure, you say this is going to be a barbecue restaurant?
Correct.
And this is a 2-story building, if I remember correctly, right?
1 story.
It's only 1 story? It's a fairly new-looking building.
It's a concrete block building. I'm not quite sure what year it's built, but it's pretty simple structure.
And as far as the improvements, so you turn out a lot of walls, open it up?
We are creating more of a retail storefront entry on the property, so we're opening up the front of the building, and we're also creating, there'll be a patio out front where there was parking on the front. There was 4 parking spaces, and we're moving that to the side of the building.
How many there's a nice-sized parking on the side, right?
Correct. There's about 15 parking spaces.
Okay. So you're going to open up the concrete blocks and put windows?
Yes.
How tall are those windows?
They're roughly about 8 feet.
Okay. That'll be a pretty nice project. Okay, no further questions.
Alderwoman Davis?
Explain the market part of you say market restaurant.
That's correct. There will be it's roughly 1,500 to 2,000 square feet for a butcher shop. They will bring in larger pieces of meat that they'll butcher themselves in the back part of the kitchen.
Okay.
And then they'll be sold along with other sides and things that they make at the front for a retail market.
Exciting. All right, thank you.
Alderman Coatar,
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Is the idea of the tax abatement stepping down over time just to, rather than doing like a 50% abatement over 10 years, just to reduce the sort of upfront hit on the tax increase and then have that phase in?
Yeah, I think we were really trying to, this is a ramp up from the business, and so the business will be, it's a new location for them. They'll be occupying the entire space. And I think the thought was, we actually did a fair amount of analysis, quite a bit actually, with St. Louis Development Corporation on comps in the area and whatnot. And I think the idea was, we would give them a little bit of a runway, if you will, to get started and, get all the jobs and get everything, kind of put in place as being a brand new location, their second location, and then, burn it off as opposed to, and I think Alderman Ogilvy, your comment in terms of the bigger hit up front, it gives them more of a runway to kind of ramp up.
Okay, great.
Alderman Bosley. No questions. Okay. Hearing no other questions, the chair will recognize a motion on Resolution 103.
I move that we adopt Resolution 103 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous.
Been moved, second, request for previous roll. Hearing no objections, we'll consider Resolution 103 as passed out of committee with the due pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Who else is in the audience that, do we have an Ameren? Where's Ameren at?
101.
101, okay. And that is sponsored by Alderman Boyd.
Thank you, members of the committee. Resolution 101 is a Union Electric doing business Ameren.
Excuse me, Alderman, are there a handout for this
Yes.
resolution?
Right over here. Hold on. Jeffrey, you got the handout. I'll just shut down everything.
Thank you, sir.
That's right.
It's a good project. Wow.
Go ahead, Alderman.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Resolution 101 is a 10-year, 95% tax abatement for Ameren, Missouri. And what they're going to do is they're acquiring some property near the southeast corner of Union and Geraldine. The actual address of the property is Geraldine. They're looking at 4301, 4321, and 4427 Geraldine to acquire. Currently, it's a building that's very underutilized. And what they're going to do is they're going to consolidate some sites into one site. It's an exciting project. Ameren has been looking for, maybe a couple of years for a site. Last year or so, we actually talked about I-70 and Goodfellow. It didn't work out. We want to keep them in the city. They recommend to go to some other sites, and by God's grace, they found one right next door to their north facility, currently operating at 4430 Union. Most people don't even know Ameren is there for the most part, because Matthew Dickey's had owned the building right on the corner, right on Burchard, when you're getting ready to get onto the highway. So it's really exciting. It's a $20 million project, 20.8. They're going to keep 40 jobs here. They're going to add 14 more jobs. And it's just an incredible opportunity for the city of St. Louis, especially keeping Ameren here. And here's a rendering of what it's going to look like. You may have a smaller one in your handout.
I do, but I like that one better.
I wanted to show you that. They're making sure that it fits in the neighborhood. It's an industrial park. They've committed to working with the community as a benefit of the tax abatement of allowing the community to come in and use conference space for meetings and so on and so forth. They're really going to be a community partner. They're committed to that, and I'm committed to working with Ameren. Ameren's been a good company to work with as far as I'm concerned with the city of St. Louis. Anytime I needed something, they've been very responsive, and I'm just very excited about the project. But I wanted the developers to probably talk more because they can talk the nuts and bolts. I just get to do the fun highlights.
All right. Are there any questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
To kind of present.
Go ahead, Doug.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Boyd. Hello again. So as Alderman Boyd said, this is an exciting opportunity for Ameren to expand its Geraldine Operations Center headquarters. We are currently located at 4430 Union on 2 acres, and we would be expanding that from 2 to 10 acres. Putting in the $20.8 million in construction and costs that he had brought up, the alderman had brought up. The other thing I would add about this is there is about a $2.5 million demolition and environmental cleanup as well. So we'll be working to clean up the property as well as part of our expansion. And the renderings that you're seeing will result in 15,000 square feet of new office space, another 32,000 feet of service space that'll provide, a modern operations center to allow them to continue to grow and service the North region. This response center actually handles about 170,000 customers in North St. Louis City and County. So we're excited and appreciate this opportunity.
Interesting.
Okay.
Chairman, also, I just want to add another tidbit. I did have a meeting with the department with Ameren that does minority participation. We had a really good meeting. Ameren is committed to exceeding expectations. Young lady, I think Veronica, Sheila, help me. The lady with minority participation is Veronica. Who's the woman who works with Byron Witherspoon? But Byron Witherspoon is the director of the program, and we had a really good meeting, and they're committed to exceeding expectations. They're going to be working with Vladimir Monroe over at SLDC to make sure they're in good compliance with our new minority participation bill, and again, it's just going to be an exciting project to bring online in the 22nd Ward. We haven't had a $20 million project since Arlington Grove housing development in 2012.
Great. Any questions? Alderman Kennedy?
No questions.
Alderman Alderwoman Davis?
I just wanted to ask, is this the old truck driving school site or not? It's not?
No, there's currently a 3-story kind of old brick warehouse on the property that's not occupied.
You're thinking about near Brown Road and Union.
Okay.
It's an old trucking company.
Oh, okay, all right. I just want to give you a comment. What I like about Ameren and how they operate within the city, actually in the region, they're very community-minded, and they're sincere about diversity. I've had opportunity to sit in on their in-house diversity program, and I know how they help us when they have jobs available. They let us know those kinds of things. So I appreciate that. Congratulations, this is a good project.
Alderman Coatar?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy?
No questions.
Alderman Bosley?
Questions.
If there are no questions, the chair will entertain a motion on Resolution 101.
So,
I move we adopt Resolution 101,
I move that
due pass recommendation.
we adopt Resolution 101 with a due pass recommendation.
it's moving and moving.
Hearing no objection for the previous roll, we'll consider Resolution 101 is heard and passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Good for North St. Louis to get a project like that. Yeah.
Now we're...
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else in an audience here before? We got 3 things left.
Sarah Martin has something.
Sarah Martin, but she's not here. I was just going to see if there's any. Okay.
Ingrassia has something here.
Ingrassia has asked us to hold, Alderwoman from the 6th has asked us to hold hers. Okay, so that is,
So we want to make this the public part of it?
so why don't we go ahead and we'll take up Board Bill number 96 now.
Okay.
And is there anyone signed up to talk on Board Bill 96?
No.
Okay, for legal purposes, we will consider that we heard this board bill. Obviously, we're going to need to get more information about it before we vote on it, but we will go ahead and, for legal purposes, consider
I'll
that.
just say something real quick.
Dale, I get, the Alderwoman from the 19th, in abundance of caution, has asked that you at least stand up and tell us what this is about.
They do have handouts. Actually, Alderwoman Martin's two resolutions were both before the HUD's committee already, and you essentially held them in committee. And so you've heard presentations by both her and the developer, and these are kind of related, these two. But the first one, which is...
Dale, I'm sorry, before we get into
We need to do both of them.
Alderman 19 asked that we at least hear something about
Sure.
the Alderwoman from the 6th.
Board Bill 96.
Oh,
We need to hear some on both of them. If we're just doing the public record.
We're
I'm sorry.
considering this a public hearing, so she just wants to give some sort of brief overview of Board Bill number 96 by Alderwoman.
okay, no, that's fine, that's fine. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. This is a two-story building that is currently not occupied at 2200 Washington Avenue. And Twain Financial, and they're a major financial institution that's located further east on Washington in rental space, wants to buy this property and move their essentially their corporate headquarters here. And there are 55 jobs involved in 25 of those would be new jobs within the next 5 years. And the building would be totally renovated. The cost of renovation would be a little more than $3.5 million. And they would occupy the space. So that's the project. It isn't far from the Jefferson Connection project, which is at Jefferson and Locust Street. And I think Jason Johnson, who is involved in the development of that, is somewhat involved in the development of this too, because I think he sees this as essentially growing the Jefferson Connection project to include this building as well. But I know the LCRA board has recommended a 5-year tax abatement of 90%, and Alderman Ingrassia asked this bill to be held because she's still, I think, discussing this with the developer, and when she has she may, I don't know if she has an idea of a committee substitute or what she wants to do, but at any rate, that's still in negotiation.
Fine. Now we've publicly heard it. There's nobody signed up to speak, so we'll go ahead and consider that as heard and held in committee for this time. Now let's jump over to Alderwoman Martins, and you said that we did hear these, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
And just, I can refresh your memory a bit. U.S. Duran Milling, which a lot of people think of as Telgrani, is a major industrial user at the far south end of the city and has been there for, 30, 40 years. But they keep expanding. And in their path of expansion was another company, the Apex Metal Company. And they had negotiated for many years in acquiring Apex Metal, and finally they came up with a deal. And so this metal building that you see in the picture, Ital Grani will be demolishing because they've acquired it now, and they will build a new 30,000 square foot building there at the cost of a couple of $1 million. So this will increase their employment by 8. And then the other side of the story, I'll wait until we get to that. But
So this is resolution number 8, is that correct?
it is, resolution number 8.
So it's a $2 million investment plus 8 additional jobs.
Right.
Okay, and how much is the tax abatement for that?
It's both of these are enhanced enterprise zone. It's 10 years at 90%.
Okay. Any questions of Dale on resolution number 8? Alderman Kennedy.
No questions.
Alderman Boyd. Questions. Alderwoman Davis.
No questions.
Alderman Coatar.
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy.
No questions.
Alderman Bosley.
No questions.
Okay, hearing no questions on resolution number 8, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass resolution 8 out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by the alderman from the 7th.
Previous.
Seconded by the alderman from the 18th. Hearing no objection to the previous roll, we will consider that as passed out of committee. Now, the last one is Alderwoman Martin's resolution 38, is that correct?
Here's the handout for that.
Okay.
Yes, and I said they're related because the building that Ital Grani bought from Apex Metal, Apex Metal has bought another building a couple of blocks away, and they're going to spend $300,000 in renovating that building.
Okay.
And you might remember Apex Metal. I mean, it's a very interesting company, and the owner is, I might think of as a rather colorful character.
Absolutely.
But it's a company that does very specialized finishing on metal products, and he described that, you know, something will be made in Japan, and it'll be shipped to Washington, D.C., and they'll do certain things to it, and then they'll wind up here in St. Louis to get the final finishing on it, a very high-end finish, and then it might be a bolt going into an automobile or something, but they just have a very specialized business that I don't know if they have any competition in the United States, but it was fun to get to know what they do and all of that. But at any rate, so this is tax abatement for them to move into their newly acquired building, and again, the tax abatement is a 10 years at 90%.
Okay. Dale, just one quick question. When we do this and they do the renovations, do we know if the previous building do we keep an eye on those if they were previously abated or if they've just come off abatement or anything like that?
This building they bought?
And I'm not necessarily this.
Oh, yeah, we
just
do.
In general.
Yeah,
So
we do.
the idea
But,
is
I mean, this
that we
one
don't-
clearly has never had abatement before, but
Okay.
yes, we do.
This never has. Okay.
No.
Good. Okay, Alderman Kennedy, any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Boyd? Alderwoman Davis?
None.
Alderman Coatar?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy?
Is the net effect between these two resolutions that more commercial space is occupied than had been previously?
Oh, sure. We have a new building, and this was an unoccupied building, so now it's going to be reoccupied.
The Apex Metal building was the okay.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Bosley?
No questions.
Hearing no questions, the chair will entertain a motion on resolution number 38.
Moved it. Previous.
It's been moved and seconded. Request for previous roll. Hearing no objections, we'll consider resolution number 38 passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation. We will go ahead and that concludes things today. We will go ahead and continue.
Chairman, I've got one bill, I believe.
Oh, I apologize, Alderman Coatar. Not only can I not figure out how to run a meeting, I end up curtailing things before we're done.
We do 79.
Had no intentions of hearing it.
May I proceed?
Somebody, paranoid people might think that I'm after you, Chief.
That's all right.
There you go. Proceed, Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Board Bill 85. This is a board bill approving a redevelopment plan, blighting study on authorizing 10 years of tax abatement at 90% for a building commonly known as the Whitty Building at 701 North 2nd Street on Laclede's Landing. Very old commercial building down there, owned by the Drurys, Drury Development Corp. They are in the midst of a rather extensive rehabilitation of this building. It's part of, it's one of the many exciting projects we've got going on Laclede's Landing right now. This is part of a sort of larger overall deal with the Drurys to finally, we've got agreement from all parties and money and funding in place to reopen Lucas Avenue. Many, many years ago, prior to my time on this board, I think in the 70s, Lucas Avenue was closed and vacated. I think at the time, the plan was to put a casino there. That wound up happening further north of that site. And for years and years, that access point to the landing's been cut off. As part of the Arts Grounds renovations, we lost access on Washington Avenue to Laclede's Landing, and it's been a problem. And so what we're doing is, in an effort to further revitalize the landing, we're reopening Lucas, which is currently a parking lot. The street will be reopened and resurfaced and come down into the landing. This building, the Whitty Building, would be immediately to the north, to the left, when you get onto the landing. It's about, I know it's got some tenants now, but they want to attract more commercial tenants. We've had some success, especially with marketing firms down there. The Raider Place building, I know, currently is about fully occupied with a number of commercial tenants. We've also got a big residential project, 56 of the first residential units going in down there. We hope to have more of those in the coming months with some other buildings on the landing. We're securing some funding to redo a number of the cobblestone streets that are in desperate need of repair. And so this is part of that sort of overall plan, is to rehab the Whitty Building. It's about $2.3 million in construction costs, $68,000 in office space, and we're hoping to get this passed. And I think the value of the abatement's about $258,000. And this has been run through Jonathan's model. You've got a whole scorecard and everything there.
Okay, any questions of the sponsor, Alderman Kennedy?
No question.
Alderman Boyd?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy? Oh, I skipped Alderwoman Davis.
I'm
sorry.
good, no
You're
questions.
Okay. Alderman Ogilvy, I'm looking for my cheat sheet.
Is Lucas Avenue going to be a public street, or is it just going to be opened up? And
No, I believe, Dale, remind me, it will or will not? It will not. Okay. Yeah, it's still going to be, I guess, privately owned, but it will be open. Yeah, and at some point, I think we're going to re-examine this in, what, like 15 years or something? I don't remember.
Right, and of course, the assumption is that, step up, it's surrounded on both sides by a parking lot, and of course, there have been a number of development discussions about those parking lots through the years, and the hope is that in not too many years, a real development might come to fruition, and then the street may be more permanently redeveloped.
okay. And the building itself it's occupied right now, it has tenants right now, but
It has some tenants right now.
Okay.
But it's in the midst of a pretty substantial, this renovation is currently under construction.
You might remember at one time Hannigan's Restaurant was on the first floor.
On the first
Of course,
floor.
it's been closed for several years now, but obviously they're all office space above, but I just hope that might help you identify the building.
Yeah, and I don't believe there's any first floor retail tenants right now. Although we have had some success down there, we've got a number of new bars and restaurants that have opened on the landing in the last 6 months or so.
Okay, thanks.
As a follow-up question on that, the street, I presume that's a public easement, though, if we're going through all this brain damage? If they own it, or is there an easement?
There'll be, I don't know how we, I don't know exactly, I don't even know if I've seen the final agreement, but yes, it will be there'll be public access. It will look like a normal street. It will still be privately owned, but it has got to be publicly available for whatever period of years we put in place. I want to say it's 15 or 20.
That sounds right.
Lumiere privately owns that street that runs in front of it, but we have public access to it.
Well, it's just my understanding, we have kind of gone back and forth with the juries to get that open, and I.
Correct, and they are finally in, no, they are in
I like
agreement.
the juries, but I just don't want to go ahead and have to negotiate with them again.
No, those negotiations are complete.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, construction should be starting within weeks on that, because we're using some disaster relief funds to help fund that we need to use or we lose.
Okay, Alderman Bosley, any questions?
No questions. You know what? I do have a question. Where are the disaster relief funds coming from?
Some state money, I don't know.
We don't know? Okay, I just had to ask. All right, no further questions, thank you.
Okay, hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion on this resolution.
Board bill.
This is a board bill, is it not? Yeah, board bill number 85.
I move Board Bill 85, move out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Second,
Previous roll.
Hearing no objections, we'll consider board bill number 85 passed
Did
out
we
of
do
committee.
79?
Which one was 79?
Did we do that one?
Who's that?
That, see, it was this.
Did we do 79?
This don't- Yeah, Northrop, we did it.
Yes, we did.
I think that's everything that was
Think
before
that's
us.
it?
We will pick up our map and resolution again, hopefully at our next meeting.
Okay.
Dale, before now and then, will you, as I was reflecting on this, the interaction between the existing TIF up there, I presume that if there's a TIF in an area, that impacts the ability to grant tax abatement, or? So of course, we're at litigation with them right now, but
You're talking about in the north side area?
yes.
Oh, we can offer tax abatement in the north side area.
And that can supersede the,
Yeah,
The
the
tip?
legislation is such we can do that. We've done that in a couple of cases, actually,
okay.
near downtown.
Okay. Well, that concludes today's business. Thank you all for your presence today. And again, I don't know how we do it, but we always end up in here for a couple hours, it seems like. But meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
All right.